Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everyone, we're gonna get started. Thank you so much for being here today for the joint CHS and O'Brien Institute Seminar Series. Before we get started, I'd just like to do a land acknowledgement. So the MC and this campus, we're located on Treaty 7 territory, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations. And then it's also home to the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is comprised of the Chiniki Bearspaw and Woodstone First Nations. And the University of Calgary and Calgary itself are also the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. I've been doing a lot of land acknowledgements at different events, and it always makes me think a little bit about what I'm doing beyond just reading words off of a piece of paper. And so lately, what I've been doing is educating myself. So finding good books from the library to read about the history of residential schools and the impact of colonialization on Indigenous people and racialized individuals in Canada. Always love an excuse to support Indigenous artists and shops. So, finding unique pieces of jewelry and artwork are also things that I really enjoy doing as my personal commitment to reconciliation. So I want to thank you all for being here today. We have a fantastic panel of individuals, calling in favors of people, and I think we're going to learn a lot today from this group. So let me introduce you. You guys probably know them, but Dr. Tolu Sajobi is a professor of biostatistics in CSM, and he's also the academic director for EDI in the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the University of Calgary. I won't read their full bios, you can read them all in the invitation. Dr. Kara Soro is an assistant professor and the also professor of head and neck health in the departments of surgery, community health sciences, and oncology. Slightly in a different order than my notes. No pressure. Dr. Jamie Kaufman has a PhD in microbiology and infectious diseases, and she's been with the W21C for over 9 years. And she now jointly leads that group as Director of Research and Innovation. And then we have Dr. Laura Nixon, who's an academic family physician providing team-based care with adults marginalized by poverty and complex needs, including addiction and serious mental illness. So we have quite the experienced group here today. I'm really looking forward to learning alongside with you. We were having a bit of a chat before about how none of us feel that we still have nailed how to put together and run a good team. So I think there'll be a lot of personal reflections throughout here. So I have the pleasure of moderating this discussion. And so I'm going to start with a question to the group. And you can put your hand up to answer first, but if you don't, I will call on you. I have the prerogative of standing and moving over you here. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, mistakes that you've made in building your research team. So we were talking about how none of us have got it right, which means that frequently we probably get it wrong. So I don't know if anyone who wants to start talking about, some reflections on where things may have gone wrong.
That's a heck of a place to start. Start from a strengths-based approach.
What characteristics have made up your best team? Let's start there.
I think I feel like my team is the strongest when there is diversity, experience, methodologies, kind of worldviews. I think that has kind of been when things are good. I think one underlying characteristic that I'm starting to realize is super important is having team members who are humble, willing to learn, curious. Because I think that's when there's like knowledge that mobilizes between different team members and really kind of creates more of like a team rather than the data analysts, the qualitative researchers, and kind of that part.
I think the diversity piece is a big one. And I think for people who aren't familiar with W21C, we are multidisciplinary in how we structure the team. And so we represent many faculties across campus. And so bringing together people with complementary expertise, different views, that can kind of understand, contribute in different ways to the team and continue to build and grow. We have some pretty wild, we've had some pretty wild team meetings where you can take a single issue and come at it from an ethics perspective and a kind of global health perspective and a sociological perspective and try and look at all those different things. Everyone kind of continues to learn and grow. I think I'll actually go back to your other question and say one of the mistakes with that, or one of the challenges that we have, not mistakes, I guess, is that not everyone speaks the same language either. So just needing to lay the foundation for what people need when they use certain terminologies, the kinds of things that they're able to share and communicate and how they're receiving that information too. So I think that like that diversity, that multidisciplinary piece is a really big one for us.
I think that's a strength though too, like if you're forced to like really explain what you need,
For sure.
you represent people too, right? And it's better.
Yeah. And we hire people with the understanding, like we always ask people like, what environment do you work best in? Everyone's like, I'm great as an individual. I like being on a team, but that team part is so important to what we do. So we can have anywhere from 40 projects to 90 projects ongoing at a time within our program. So even if you might be the only person working on a project, there's still a team behind you to contribute, to help troubleshoot, to help celebrate those successes, to look at lessons learned, and those kinds of things too. So that mindset of people has to be very prominent.
Diversity really resonates for me as far as the work that we've been doing for the last 7 years or so. I think maybe tested a little bit the limits of diversity, just in trying to bring people together for common understanding and multiple perspectives. One of the first projects I was given the opportunity to support here was a hospital-based addiction medicine consult team, the ARCH team, which is now at the Gidlockie Hospital, but originated at the Royal Alex Hospital. And so that was my fast introduction to community-based participatory action research. And I had worked in the landscape for many years, fortunately as a clinician, which gave me lots of skills and then revealed huge gaps in my knowledge. And so that would be I think my big learning and mistake that I continue to try to correct and to mitigate. I mentioned, curiosity, keen to learn, humility. I think I really strive to model that. And that really fuels, I think, in our team that sentiment, because we're also working with community-based co-researchers, people with lived and living experience of intersecting stuff, poverty and homelessness and substance use challenges and aging. And then community agency partners who are very widely and differently resourced to participate in the research activities. And sometimes the landscape can really shift suddenly. And the people who you have been working with and thought, okay, we're rolling, their circumstances change. Their executive leadership resigns. Their middle management disappears. Frontline staff turns over, etc. So it's really exciting and interesting, but it's also comes with interesting connections. Absolutely, totally.
I think those are great points. One thing that I want to mention based on what I'm hearing on the table is the issue that the peculiarity of teams, right? There are teams that just, I remember years ago when I started in my research lab, it was just 1 or 2 students, right? And then now I have kind of 50% full-time, so 50% students. The experience of JD within W21C is completely different, right? Laura's perspective is also different. So different, the dynamics of each team determines the kind of challenges that you face. So for me, some of the mistakes is number one, assuming that once somebody is good on paper, that sells it with me, right? So after several doubts, I go back to some of my friends and mentors and say, what am I doing wrong? This person is perfect on paper. And it took me a while to realize that sometimes people look great on paper, but they don't have the people skills or ability to work in a team. Some people don't look good on paper, but they're willing to learn, they check all the boxes, all the lives, right? So how do you find that balance, right? So that's one of the mistakes that I think I'm still making. You know, I wish there's a AI algorithm that can correctly predict our statistical model, but right now I don't have anything that works. And maybe because that is just human beings, right? Some people come in willing to do the work, but life circumstance happens. And then you have like project timelines, right? So those are that's one of the challenges. The other challenge that I've learned from, and this is not pro student, pro mentorship, pro supervising students and listening with students, but making my research team 90%, 100% student focused. I have some challenges because I have grant expectations. I have to deliver on grants. I have to work with collaborators, you know, to deliver on projects that I promised. But then I also have to retain MSc thesis or PhD thesis, right? So the whole pressure comes down. So that's it's not a mistake to say, but it's it's become a learning moment that I'll just, okay, I have to find a way, but to cobble funds together to have full-time staff and then substantial.
What's your balance right now in terms of staff? Students? Have you found the sweet spot?
Not yet, because, and the reason why I say not yet is because as you grow in your career, two things change. It's your ability to take on things changes, right? So in the office of the EPS, I would have director for the BI data, which is supposed to be 0.25. Custom will also attest to that if the universe say 0.25 equals, well, be sure that probably 0.75. So I had to start trying to find that balance between what works for me at the same time, making sure that I'm there to support, but also at the same time delivering projects. So it's really working progress.
That one thing you all kind of said or alluded to is that none of you mentioned bringing on the most highly qualified person with, you know, degree XYZ. You all talked about more personal characteristics. That's so important when you're trying to build a good team. Let's rewind a little bit and talk about like, how do you decide who to recruit and determine if they're the right fit? Like you mentioned, Tolu, you know, that someone's CV might be really strong, and they don't work out for other reasons, or someone might have a relatively weak CV and end up working out really well. So how do you all make those decisions when you're hiring your staff?
I think vibe is huge, right? And there's, like, I want to build even on what Total was saying, is that you can have great skill sets on paper that don't translate. But you can also have people that want to learn, and you can sense that, and you get that feeling that they're people that would integrate well within a team. Not everybody knows how to be part of a team, and it doesn't mean they're a poor team player. It just might mean they haven't had an opportunity to do that, or to learn, or to, you know, they've been in a position where they've had to fly solo for a really long time, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it or come together. So I think often when we're hiring and looking at, you know, it's skills, but you could just hire without an interview if that's what you were doing, but you do the interview process, you see how multiple people feel, you know, and you think about where that person's going to fit within the team structure, whether that's the smaller teams, the project teams, the bigger team. So vibe is a very, probably not HR appropriate way to approach it, but it's true, like there's still that person.
I honestly, it's something I'm still working on. So for the social, I'm still trying to find out what works. But some of the approaches I've taken is first of all, look at what do I need, right? Really stepping back and say, okay, what do I need for this person? Okay, I am supporting the clinical trials for 3 CHR grants for which I've budgeted money, and I need to hire somebody to support me to do this. Okay, I need somebody that can do simulations. I need somebody that's very good at writing. So I first of all list it out, right? And then vibe is very important. But I also realized that we could also be prone to unconscious bias, right? You know, if you're somebody that's very nice, somebody can come across the Zoom link or across the table as very nice and jovial, whereas there could be somebody else that's an introvert that is equally as good, but because I'm attracted to somebody that is lively and an introvert, so opposite attracts, I tend to go for that. So one of the things I've done to handle that is probably invite some of my collaborators to co-interview with me. And so I minimize the biases, and something like that could vary. My last report was for a statistical analyst. And so I asked some of the PhD folks in my lab and collaborators to be part of the interview process. So I knew a guy that was very good, worked with him in the past, and I thought it was going to be a good fit for the role. But then after we did all the interviews, we had this person that was less qualified, and everybody said he's good. He's the person we should go for, right? So, and I was just okay, you know, every other person's things, yeah, I'm going to be fine with that. It's just that it's going to take some time to get this person out, right? So I finally reached out to somebody that knows this other person I thought would be a good fit. And the information I got, wow, really, I realized that we dodged the bullet completely, you know, because I trusted the other people in my group. And the person I thought, oh, he doesn't have so much experience at master's level, is actually flying higher, performing better than what I expected, right? So I'll kind of say if you're in that situation, you know, bring in me fresh set of eyes, you know, and you don't go around with that.
That was such a good point. The team-based hiring is so important to meet with the people who this person, oftentimes the people we hire, we as, you know, the PI or the manager actually don't interact with them as much day to day as the other members of the team do. So it's really important.
The implicit bias piece is really big, and I think, I don't even remember where we sort of got the advice from, but basically, we tend to look for the most qualified person, and that's who we look to hire. And sometimes, like if you filter that out and look at what opportunities people have had, what their life experience has allowed them to do, maybe they haven't been able to volunteer or do summer student positions and all of those kinds of things. So we try to step it back from that and look at, okay, well, what are the minimum qualifications that we've asked for this position? Because people will get bored very quickly if they're very competent, right? Like if they're already doing that role, they can do it really, really well. It's not gonna go well for a long period of time. But if you can bring in someone who maybe hasn't had the opportunities, who has the skill set, the desire, the ability to learn, that unconscious bias piece, if you can have that front and center, is huge.
It's really important. What about your teams that include members of the public, people, citizens, people with lived and living experience? Like, what are your experiences bringing them onto your team?
I was just thinking about that because I think it's maybe a different, domain. So our key, sometimes we'll use the term community liaison, or they are peer support workers who are working in the capacity of in the peer support capacity within our community engagement work. I have the good fortune of knowing a handful of folks for about 6-7 years in different capacities. And some of them are actively employed currently by CHS or the Drop-In Center or the Association of Mental Health. And so I've been able to follow their careers. and as well as their recovery journeys, which in some cases are quite smooth and in other cases not. And so being prepared to do that, and having a relationship with them that I think goes a little bit beyond maybe a traditional whatever would be employer and staff sort of relationship. I have the good fortune of still being part of U of A work. One is a realist review led by Janetta Salvagio about involving people with lived and lived experience, people who use drugs in research and health services planning and service work and kind of the impact on them. And that's been really valuable learning to endeavor to be a better co-researcher with them. So I think sort of flexibility, responsiveness, keeping eyes on shared goals and destinations, but oftentimes just being ready to, okay, this isn't what we're going to be doing this week or this month. We're going to come at this another way. Or holy mackerel, Teresa's an absolute machine as far as connecting with people and identifying people in the community who would be great contributors to our discussion and well-resourced. And so flexing our plans in order to capitalize on that strength. And it doesn't align well with kind of heavy duty predetermined plans, but also making sure that, and I have the good fortune of co-Is who are, okay, but we have to do this. Okay, right, here we are. So
The value of a team beyond your own team as well.
absolutely.
So when you're all making decisions about bringing people onto your team, do you have differences in what you're looking for in trainees versus staff? And how do you kind of decide whether you need a trainee or whether you need, a staff member, and how do you make those decisions?
Available funding is one of the biggest factor for that, right? We have been there funding. So I run a grants-based research team, right? So depending on what's available and what I have budgeted in grants, but one of the factors is also apart from funding is just the bandwidth that I have to supervise things. So these days I'm finding very easy to kind of ask 1 or 2 collaborators to say, okay, can you give me 0.5? Can you give me 0.5? I need to, and it's more to get this done. So just getting staff that will be there. And so I have a team that works with other teams, right? So apart from getting the funding, we will to demonstrate to those teams that there's value, long-term value for them. So that's
I think it's bandwidth a lot of the time, like, yes, funding students are less expensive than a full-time economy, but I think bandwidth, because, your first, and timelines. So if you take on a new student, the first year is pretty much a write-off, they're in classes the first year. So if you need something done that year, that's not the right person to look for. I think also because my program research policy to Toulouse, where it's like grant-based, project-based. So it probably also depends on the fit of that project or parts of that project for what a master's student would want to do for a thesis or a PhD or a postdoc. Because that's, and bandwidth, because there's only so many students that can do a good job supervising applicants.
I would say largely the same. It was really, really important for a 3-year project we had going with Health Canada funding. It was an intervention co-design project based in community, and we really needed relational continuity. And I had the benefit of a staff person from the previous project, the arch evaluation scale up. For a while there, we just kind of ham and egged the funding to keep them going. But they had such incredible knowledge and relationships with not only individuals in the community, but community agencies. We had field presence at the mustard seed and the drop-in center and Alpha's and whatnot. And that doesn't, students don't have that. Oh, I shouldn't say that actually, because we actually have an amazing master student now who had experience in Lethbridge as a counselor, division counselor with Alpha House in Lethbridge. So typically though, students' resources, time and situatedness may not lend itself to that intensity of relationship development and maintenance, because that continuity is kind of everything in terms of engagement in the co-design process and the evaluation and the knowledge mobilization, and in our case, subsequent funding applications and success there that's rolled over. So it's just kind of how we're going. It's a snowball that's grown, and we're just gonna keep it.
Also say that opportunity. There's a really good student that has actually solved. Can I find something? It feels so good.
So how do you keep your teams going? What do you do to keep teams cohesive and motivated and, you know, working together and, you know, inspired to work together for these, you know, shared goals that you have?
I'll start with your values, right? And so building teams is essentially it's like you got growing something, right? And everything comes down to your leadership. What values do you, what kind of leadership values you hold, because that's what you project the team, right? So if you want a collaborative team, then you're not probably you want to start getting treated that. So for me, for one, it's allowing for collaborative projects where members of the team can come together and work on the same project. It will be different sides of the same problem. As somebody's looking at it from machine learning perspective, the other person is looking at it from a statistical perspective, the other person is looking at it from a qualitative perspective, right? So bringing multiple teams together to work on things, that's number one. Number two thing that I think it's very important is just compassion, just treating people as human beings. And sorry to say, in academia, we don't do that a lot. We look at it in terms of papers, in terms of grants, in terms of scholarships and awards. And so really treating them as human beings, say, hey, you know, I am just, you know, oh, you can't come down at 9 o'clock because your son is sick or there's snow outside. Yeah, it's okay, right? So when people realize that even though we want that important deadline, but you are also passionate enough, compassionate enough, and you see them for who they are, it's all going to go extra mile. And then finally, I would say, showing them the big picture. You know, sometimes I think it was Laura or Jim that said it, that it's easier to just get members of your team to work on something, just one little area, you don't see the big picture. But bringing everybody together and say, this is what we do, this is our work at a bigger level affects other teams. This is how we contribute globally, right? Or just on the big scale. So I'm helping everybody to see the big picture and how they are this fits into that big picture. It's kind of brings people together and then sometimes start living. Some will get together, end of time get together, you get your team to unwind sometimes, or whatever it is.
Ditto. No, but I think that's a great summary for us. We don't have a lot of students, so, but our goal is we want to build and maintain a really talented pool of people that we can deploy to projects, allow them opportunity for growth and development, really focus on growth and development as part of W21Cs. We want people to feel like we're invested in the program and our values and what we do, but also them as people, right? And that's huge. And so if there's projects that fit within their wheelhouse, if there's courses they want to take, if there's areas that they want to participate, as much as possible, we try and do that for people so that they feel like they're part of that. But we know that our transitionary piece is we often will get people who come between their undergrad and grad school, or between grad school degrees, or before med school. And we want them to have that culture embedded. So we want them to be thinking about health system innovation and things like that by the time that they leave. And we get some of them back as summer students or after they're done their courses. So that engagement piece is huge for us. And I would say it really just echoes what Tolu said, like I have the benefit of having a co-director, and we lead by example, and we really focus on that, the value and the human piece of the program. And it's, you know, we have the opportunity because we're in this little pocket in academia, to try and kind of shift people's perspectives about how to be successful.
Sarah, can you talk about like the group working sessions that you do and how that kind of helps with your team?
I feel like I'm glad to hear from everyone else, because I feel like I do struggle on kind of creating like the vision of what I think a team is. So there's been, you will know because you were part of this, that I think when I think about what I would like my team to look like, it goes back to when we were working together. It's like how many years ago?
Yeah.
12, 10, like a long time ago. We had a great group of people. We liked each other outside of work and inside of work. And I think that those relationships, even outside of work, really amplified our productivity and excellence at work because we enjoyed it. And that's kind of like when I think about what I want my team to look like, that's it. I'm struggling. I don't like I'm not there. So one thing I've started, and part of it is this hybrid, some people don't want to come in, and I don't think I'm a very effective leader entirely virtually. Like I like the human interaction. So one thing I'm doing to try and get a little bit closer to that is we do work sessions. So every 2 weeks we have some kind of meeting. So 1 week it'll be a team meeting, which is essentially just a 1 hour. Sometimes it's professional development, like talks and things like that. Sometimes it's literally just updates with where are all the projects at, how are we doing, what do we need help with, and then the other sessions are work sessions. So I think we block 4 hours in the middle of the day where we come into this room, we order in lunch, and we just work. So it's not, sometimes there's formal presentations depending on what people have asked for, but then we just work all together. And it gives an opportunity to kind of just see each other and talk. A lot of times that's where it'd be like, oh my gosh, did you work slides? Like, you know, kind of that personal connection. So I think it's going well. But I still have so much area.
I just learned something from you, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, to give credit where credit's due, I think it was Huda that suggested this.
That's awesome. Yeah, you have to be a bit innovative, especially when your team's not always here and they're not always here at the same time.
Right, because there's students during classes, everyone, and I do encourage people to work on their own schedule. I don't want to dictate, you must be here from 9 to 5, or like that, so it's just not my work. Yeah, it's hard for everyone to be here at the same time.
So before we move on to giving the group an opportunity to ask you all some questions, I'd love to talk a little bit about maybe challenges that you've had. And I know that there could be many, but like, what are some recurring things that either you've experienced or you've heard, you know, from your colleagues, and what strategies have you used to overcome them? This is something I would love to hear about.
Sometimes the larger the group, the harder it is, because receptive communication is very challenging. And so we try very hard to send consistent messaging to people. And our group can sometimes, like, it's on this medium side right now, but we have about 30 people within our group. And we try to give everyone the same messages at the same time, and it doesn't always land that way, right? And so I don't have a solution for that. I've got nothing to offer other than, you know, trying to understand where people are coming in, trying to personalize things a little bit. But it's tricky because it's humans.
my biggest job, we're not trained for this when we're doing PhDs, right? So kind of, I've tried to do some learning. It's just not, I don't always feel like I'm equipped with the skill set that I need to recruit, retain, empower, like all of those aspects of the kind of person leader.
For me, challenges are real, okay, but sometimes situating the challenges in the right context is very important. So, one thing I've noticed, so I started supervising 10 years ago, and 11 years ago. People that are here longer will probably have noticed how the generations that have gone through this wars have changed, how the norms have changed, right? So I have students that will text me in the middle of the night, I'm doing this, check my text. But it's completely different generation that generation of supervising before. So being adaptable now, dynamic now is very important. Also, I would say when challenges come, pressing mind, different dimensions, really leveraging the support system is very important. It will be talking to the department head, coming to casting, connecting with senior colleagues, my faculty was student, right? So sometimes getting that wisdom from people who have gone ahead, it's okay, when issues are like this, how do I figure it out, right? So one of the beautiful or most important advice I got from the mentor was like, how do I find those students? He said, okay, start with them from summer students. And he advised me to start taking summer students. And so I got involved with the CHS program, and then took a few students. Some of them went on to medical school, some of them masters, and so I had the opportunity to so leverage that network, right? There will always be challenges because we're not supervising robots, we're working with human beings and stop habits, right? We keep it nice and, but reality leveraging that is right.
So this is partially a selfish question, but I'm really curious, how do you all, what are some creative strategies you've employed to keep your teams moving and functioning and staffed when, grants and resources kind of ebb and flow over time? What have you done to make sure that you can still keep things moving, maybe when your grant isn't funded for the, first, second, third submissions?
I think the C3, the critical care research network that Tom very much created, that was a really good source when I was very new and I had very little money because it's just startup funds. So sharing resources. So you guys already had a data analyst, I just borrow one, and you mentioned this as well, so borrow 0.1 for a period of time. So I think sharing resources, and I know I've reached out to Fiona at one point, because I have a amazing project coordinator, but she's been on sick leave for almost a year now. And so I'm kind of stumbling to try and fill that role. And so I reached out to Fiona, I was like, I just need somebody to help with this, because she would do it, but she's not here. And the C3. So I think it's like leveraging resources, because sometimes people are underworked too, which is not, I worry about overworking people, but being underworked for a lot of people who have the skills and expertise that they don't want to work together. Right? So just, outrageous people.
I was gonna say, perfect time to say that's what we do. So that's what our team is meant to do, is to contain the skill set to be able to support people in those positions. So lots of times new investigators, people that don't have protected research time. And we have to think creatively sometimes too, when the projects are, we kind of run this research consultancy model, but if projects are delayed or things are to happen, we still have to keep people busy, right? And so partial FTEs, helping support other faculty, things like that's very much.
The other thing that I hadn't ever planned on doing, but again, when I was quite early in my career and I didn't have any grant funding, I was just working on startups. There was actually quite a few graduate students who approached me to volunteer, and I'm like, oh, I don't want you to volunteer, you should be paid for this, but they just want extra experience. So it is kind of a win-win as long as you don't have that relationship, I think. So yeah, reaching out to students that might want to, especially PI who have similar research projects and skills, seeing if there's any students that wanted extra opportunities for authorship credit rather than financial credit.
One thing I found helpful too is like in a similar vein is like co-supervising students, like a nice way to offset the workload and the cost. And so sometimes, you know, that model works really well if you're under-resourced for time or money. And it's fun too to get to work with your colleagues that way as well.
We've had really good luck with collaborating with other institutions too. Mount Royal, and we now have partners in BC and Ontario for knowledge mobilization. Well, it's actually a planning and dissemination grant, but we're disseminating and then planning because of the state we're in. But I've been approached by students too, also wanting to volunteer and having that same feeling. Well, no, I will at least give you a stipend. But for them, the win is the getting exposure to participatory methods, to learning the landscape of some of the agencies, and getting the opportunity to work with peer researchers and whatnot. That just gives them different skills and experiences that are valuable to them.
So I'd like to give people, in the crowd, an opportunity to ask questions. So maybe while the questions are coming in online too, maybe Jamie, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and a lot of you touched on bits of this, the idea that, like, to the States, where your state's in, you might hire somebody who looks great on paper, but now they're working out, that's not great for the morale of your team, that's not great for your efficiency. If you're a good gardener of your team, somebody has to weed it out, and Kara said, but you haven't been trained with these kind of administrative tasks. So if you spot somebody who needs to go for the good of the whole team, especially the academics, I feel like you guys haven't been trained on any of this. What have you done? Do you call it HR? Do you take courses? I mean, that was the hardest thing for me when is learning to be the tough cop, because you all want to have that kind of unnurtured students or whatever. There's sometimes you just can't nurture you.
Jamie's my bad cop.
So what do you guys do as a faculty?
Well, it depends on whether they're students or staff. If it's student, then Bonnie is your best friend, like the chair. You go to Bonnie, and I've been in that situation myself, and just, most of all, before I get there, I find time to sit down with the person, try to understand the context. But if it's not something that can be rectified, you know, the support system is Bonnie cannot handle it. The supervisory committees also there. Sometimes before it gets to the graduate program director, the supervisory committee could also come around to help, and nothing then take it off with the graduate program director for staff. Is it really tricky? You know, but making the HR person your friend, it's probably a good way to go, and just pick up the phone, don't send emails, just call up and ask for help, and say, do I deal with this? You know, yeah.
Oh, I'm like a bench scientist by training, so HR was not, we do a ton of HR, and it's tricky. There's a lot of immersive learning that happens. I feel like we've learned a lot by trial and error. But the resources are also here at the university to help support that. So students are less of a concern for us, but we definitely have had times where dynamics haven't been good, or it's not the right fit, or productivity or projects have changed. There's lots of reasons that people aren't the right fit. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of learn as you go. There's support, there's courses. I think we have the benefit of doing that a little bit more, like we're not teaching and we're not running research projects in the same traditional way like a faculty member would. Yeah, I don't know if it gets easier, but the knowledge builds.
I think just like HR is there to help you as a faculty member, like that is their role, right? So I found through numerous mistakes on my part, documenting things, and talking to HR early is super important, especially if you think that that employment relationship might need to end at some point. Like you can't just decide, oh, you know, it might get better. Like you also want to help the person. So I think, you know, HR has strategies for that.
I found it really important to, it's already been mentioned, in terms of checking in regularly and having, you know, making myself available, even in situations that I anticipate are not gonna be comfortable. There's, you know, a sense, both sides are not feeling like this isn't what I signed up for.
And what do you do for a community person on a team?
Yeah, it can be quite tricky, and sometimes it's a conversation of, you know, this doesn't seem to be a good fit. And being creative about, well, but we actually have this, right? We have this role that I anticipate coming up. And that's worked out really well. It's part of the beauty of, we call it the swamp, but it's a terrible metaphor. You're in a very unpredictable landscape. So things, opportunities do come up. But also, walking that line, especially as a clinician, you know, I want to be very clear about my boundaries, but as well also recognizing at times, I think there's some other issues happening here. Could you please check in with HR and ensure that we are supporting you in any way it's needed. Accommodations for health issues or learning needs or various things have just made a world of difference once a person felt like, oh, this person's actually going to be receptive to that. It's like, yes, very receptive. Let's get her done. And so that was a steep learning.
Yeah, we have one question online that says, have any of you taken any leadership mentorship trainings on how to build effective teams? There's a lot of discussion about what we look for in the trainee or team member, but I think part of having an effective team is having a leader who can set up the environment for team members to thrive, learn, and advance in their roles. What experiences have you had with other leaders that you've learned from that have influenced how you approach your own teams?
Great point. Yeah, great point. Still taking a number of leadership courses. Yeah, it's good. I took a leadership course through the College School of Medicine and Business School. To be the difference between working groups and teams, for example. And I found that very helpful. I have mentors outside Harvard and connect with some people that in the hospital, senior colleagues that I have mentoring leadership as well. So it's number one, I think it comes down to leadership philosophy. You know, when people are applying for academic jobs, we ask them about teaching philosophy, but we often don't ask them about what are your values about leadership, because that's what you bring into the job as well. So while we're saying team members need to develop, we also have to keep updating ourselves and developing ourselves.
I'm a little bit different in that I'm an employee of the university, like a max employee. So I will say that this university as a whole has great offerings in terms of leadership, depending on sort of where you want to be, different departments, different continuing education, things like that. So for me, I've done a couple of programs, I've done courses in it, very much like figuring out that leadership philosophy. And then finding your people, like finding other leaders who align with your values, who align with your philosophy that you can bounce stuff off of. I find it harder to find a mentor in my position. So that's a big challenge. So I don't know that that's in place or it's maybe unofficially and people don't know that I'm just like stalking their approaches, but there are some truly excellent resources that, you know, and you'll take bits and pieces from it that resonate, and then you start to formulate who you want to be. And I think everyone's experienced, or most people have experienced a great leader that they want to emulate, and people have experienced, I hate to say poor leader because they maybe aren't a leader, right? But they've had negative experiences that they don't want to duplicate or emulate with other people. So kind of take all those pieces in, like it's real world learning, it's classroom learning, it's peer learning.
That's such a great point. A lot of my early leadership style was based on what not to do, not necessarily what to do. Because of that, especially when you're a junior faculty and you just don't have a lot of experience supervising people yet, and you hope all your hires work out, but sometimes they don't. Yeah, like my emotional response to having difficult conversations has definitely changed over time. It used to be very, very emotional for me. Still is, but just not as outwardly physically noticeable. Yeah.
I know we should be wrapping up, but I had like a two-part question of, how do you know when to say no when you're recruiting? And then also, have you ever had situations where a team member or something in the team wasn't working and it wasn't to the point where you had to like take someone out of the team, but maybe steer your team dynamic in a different direction? And how did you figure or navigate that situation?
I'm not good at much saying no. I get, you know, one of my problems is I get really excited by certain people. And I'm like, wow, maybe they could work on this, maybe they could work on that. And I think it's doing a disservice to everyone, because if I don't have the resources to properly support somebody, then that's not fair to them. And then I'm overworked and then also not able to dedicate resources to everybody else either. So I'm not good. I'm not like tell me how to do it. I have had a couple of situations, again, like my team are quite different in terms of skill sets, backgrounds and all that type of thing. So sometimes we have had issues where it wasn't, again, the person's quality of work was excellent, but there was maybe a bit of not conflict, just like rubbing each other the wrong way, a couple of the team members who were working together. And I think there was just some honest conversations, which I'm getting better at, because I also see them again at, like, they serve the other person as well, right? Like, if people aren't meeting it so far, like letting them know usually gets them past that hump, and that's what my experience. Just having some difficult conversations about, you know, this person's like, just value all the team members, think about how you're communicating and how that might rub off and perceived to other people. So I think it's just having some honest conversations and a constructive growth perspective.
So this kind of jumps back to the last question, but in our organization, we really love Brene Brown. And we really try and adhere to like clear is kind, because you're not doing anyone else a service. Like, you're just doing such a disservice to not be providing feedback, not maybe tweak the team that they're on, put them on a different team, provide some feedback. You're not alone. We get really excited about people. Like, it's very easy to meet someone and be like, oh my God, we should find a place for them. We should definitely find a place for them. And what we have to do is bring it back to the program. You know, so there's hiring a person, and then there's hiring for the program and what we actually need to do. And so that allows us to sort of say no and put some boundaries in place and be like, okay, but if this kind of thing comes open for this person, otherwise you have a team of like 70, because there's amazing people, right? But we have to remember that at the end of the day, you know, we have money coming in, people to pay, like, we have to balance all of those things, and it really has to fit within the program. Although there's amazing people that would, same thing, you're just like,
Yeah.
but it, you know, it's not the right time.
I think early on too, you say yes to more things than you, and it's just a skill that you learn and develop over time. You get really, I used to find it very like gratifying to get an email from someone who wanted to work with me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got an email and someone likes me, and then I just want to say yes. And so like that, sometimes that used to affect the number of people I worked with, for sure. Well, I think with that, we'll wrap up today, and join me in thanking our wonderful panel for their time. Thank you.
Thanks, team. Did you how many long?